I'm Stephanie. Welcome to the Reading Room meets Whine Club, as in this video I'm going to do some reviews of my 10 worst reads of this year. But first off, I do have to point out, look how cute this glass is. I have to thank my mother-in-law for getting us this last Christmas. We just got back from a trip to Barcelona, and this wine glass is supposed to be inspired by, Gaudi, all of his buildings around Barcelona. So I am drinking out of this glass. But I also brought reinforcements in case I need a refill as I talk about these terrible reads of 2024. Now, these reviews do contain spoilers, as I do have to talk about what I didn't like, and that often means revealing what happens within the story. I'm also going to say that I say in all my reviews that these are solely about the books, not about the authors as people. I'm so happy for them that they got their work published. I just have a few issues with some of the things that they were publishing this year. So let's go ahead and get into it and talk about my 10 worst reads of 2024. I also want to say that I'm probably not going to read the synopses from the books just because that will totally destroy my voice. I think if I'm doing 10 books and have to read all the synopses and then talk about what I didn't like about them, if I do talk about something very specific, then I probably will read the synopsis just so you can have an understanding of what's going on. And all of these videos, I do have their own videos about them, just because, again, these were Whine Club episodes. But let's go ahead and get into it. So first up, we have When I'm Dead by Hannah Morrissey. So the reason I didn't really love this is it was very boring and slow. And I felt like the book actually had a lot of potential. It just kind of wasted it. Because this book is mostly our main characters thinking the same thoughts over and over and over again. But those thoughts are not moving the plot forward. Or when we do have like a new thought, it's because everyone is jumping to the wildest conclusion or flying off the handle at the smallest provocation. It was exhausting to read about this detective that has no real good detecting skills. There's also a character in this named Libby, and she honestly could have been really interesting, but she's not, because all I know about her is that she's fat and she's creepy. She's fat. It is very important that you know that she's fat. I don't know why it's so important, but it is mentioned 1 million times. She's a very good red herring. There could have been a lot done with her. So, of course, she just kind of falls off the face of the earth and out of the story. Cool. The killer in this is also cartoonishly bad. We're not even introduced to the killer until like over halfway into the story. He's barely there. We don't get his point of view until he just needs to tell us and explain to us readers what's going on. And I just thought it was poorly executed. Like, basically we find out that the killer's sister died, and the character Chloe that the parents are looking for because they think she's dead is the spitting image of the dead sister, and so she's kidnapped to replace the dead sister. And the ending it kind of made me laugh, and it's not supposed to, like, it's not written to be funny, but the villain's monologue and his behavior was just so over the top that I couldn't buy it. There's also this big, like, climactic action scene that I could not picture in my head because I didn't understand what was happening. I think some people, were kicking each other and punching each other, but, like, I couldn't follow it. I couldn't understand what was going on. And at that point, I also didn't really care to figure out what was going on. I also got really bored of the repetition of how terrible and gross and awful the setting is. So it takes place in this town called Black Harbor, but it's poor and dirty, and there's a section of town that's home to gross government housing, and those people are poor. Don't you know? They're gonna commit crimes. There's just so much crime happening in the city that it's not uncommon for girls to be murdered walking home. This place is hell on earth, and everyone hates it. Then move! My God. Like, a reviewer on Goodreads named Rachel summed it up really well by saying, Black Harbor is a bad place. A very bad place. The worst place ever. This is repeated so many times that I felt like Batman needed to show up and free it of crime. But then the worst is, by the end of the book, after harping on and on and on about how terrible this town is, our main character Rowan is all, "This is my home and I love it." Ma'am, your daughter was kidnapped and some of her friends died and you hate this place. I mean, I get that you get your daughter back in the end, but like, the town still kind of sucks. Ugh. Now, to give credit where it's due, the finding of the bodies was really well written and it was creepy. And there is an interesting mystery that wants to be there. But it's just not enough to carry this. There's so much happening and I was so bored. I was so bored. It just got really repetitive and just drags on and on and on. At the end of the day, I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. So not the worst read of the year, but it's not doing really great for itself. Next up was Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. And I gotta say, this one was painful. I read up to page, I think 190, and then I kind of started skimming. And even while I was skimming, I considered DNFing every 2 pages. I was really on the struggle bus with this. And I read this because someone whose opinion I really value recommended it. So again, take this review with a grain of salt because you might absolutely love this. The reason I didn't really love this is the main heroine just pissed me off. This is about a woman who writes fanfic about, let's be honest here, Game of Thrones and the character of Jaime Lannister, even though he's called something else in this. What is he called? Aeneas, Aeneas. So she cosplays as the character who's in a relationship with off-brand Jaime. So through plot magic, she gets to meet the actor of Jaime's character named Marcus. And at their first meeting, she is a total bitch to him. She barely seems to tolerate his existence and hates every minute of this date. She tells him that she writes sexy fanfic about his character, and I honestly got the impression that she said this just to make him uncomfortable. But then we get our first big reveal, because Marcus, the actor who plays off-brand Jaime, also writes fanfic about his character, and he and April have been friends in the fanfic world for years without knowing it. Oh, what a coinkydink. So now Marcus knows, but he's not going to tell April that he knows, for contrived reasons to stretch out the story. So April seems miserable on this date. Marcus is smitten and thinks she is amazing and intelligent and beautiful and perfect and the most wonderful person to ever grace God's green earth. So he asks her out again, and she accepts. She thinks he's so shallow, and yet she wants to go out with him again because he's a celebrity? Who's the shallow one now, April? Honestly, this book just felt very 13-year-old wish fulfillment. Like, April is already perfect, thank you very much. Others just don't realize it, and she will get everything that she wants without really having to change or work for it. And it's this fantasy of the nerdy girl ends up with the movie star, but it didn't really feel earned. Because again, she's kind of an asshole to him. But even him, he is also wish fulfillment because he's gorgeous, he's wealthy, he's popular, but he's also shy, and he's kind of a nerd, and he's really smart, but he's also ready to throw down at any time, and he's just so awed and amazed by everything that April does, and cannot believe he's lucky enough to have her because she is perfect and never does anything wrong. His life means nothing without her, and his happiness is completely wrapped up in her. It's very unrealistic. Again, mostly because April is not, I don't think she's this amazing person. She's so quick to assume the worst in people, thinks that she knows best, steamrolls over other people, is kind of selfish, has multiple temper tantrums, and won't just have a conversation about anything. She gets so mad at Marcus at one point for him not having Professor X's ability of telepathy. Like, she doesn't communicate what she needs or wants, and then just assumes that he isn't following her wishes without them being communicated just to piss her off, and so then she takes her anger out on him. And he lets her. He never challenges her or pushes back. I don't particularly think that relationships built on like fighting and drama for the sake of passion are healthy, but this wasn't really healthy either. Everything is his fault. He's trying to help April, but didn't do it the way she wanted. He even says at one point that she may have told him less than he needed to know, but it's his fault for not realizing she didn't tell him what she needed. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I'm sorry, were April's vocal cords like slashed? Can she not talk? Can she not communicate? Now, to be fair, she does admit that she is in the wrong in that situation. But even then, his response is, her near instant gratification was a graciousness he hadn't expected and wasn't certain he even deserved. Are you fucking kidding me? He just blames himself for assuming and not asking. Again, can April no longer speak? Like, normally I'm pretty good at spotting Mary Sue's in books, but April was kind of a sneaky bitch, and she made it pretty far in before I recognized her for who she is. I also couldn't tell if this book was supposed to be her gaining confidence, or if she already had it. Like, it changes with every chapter. And April focuses so much on her weight, when Marcus obviously doesn't care. She's proud and self-confident one chapter, then insecure the next, and puts all of her validation as a human being on a hot guy wanting her. I just had hoped that she was going to have a lot more depth, because, again, isn't she supposed to be confident and have some self-respect and realize that a man should love her for her? And he obviously does. It's like Hannah from the recent season of Love is Blind DC. Like, her physical aspect was never the problem. It's her personality that needs help. And again, I was a fat teenager. I've heard the gamut of jokes at my expense. But there were a lot of things that, like, April even thinks about herself that I'm like, but would you really be thinking this? I guess everyone's experience is different. I also have to say, since this is a romance, the spicy scenes just weren't for me, and that is a personal thing. I recognize that with a lot of romances that I read that I don't particularly enjoy, like the spicy scenes. And I felt these scenes were overly long and very, very detailed and graphic. We're talking lots of slick spaces and sucking juices off of fingers that taste earthy. Nah, I'm good. Again, that is a complete personal preference. Your mileage may vary, and you might love the spicy scenes in this, and I would love that for you. Obviously, some people did, as this is book 1 of a series. Like I said, this was a real struggle. I was bored. I was annoyed. This book really tried my patience and my sanity. This was like 400 pages of a story that I didn't really want to read. I also found it a bit too twee and melodramatic at the same time. I guess at least like Marcus and April deserve each other because they're both just drama llamas and no one else should have to put up with them. A lot of this was like fluff and cheap, but also unrealistic. I wanted more, but the book didn't really do the work. It really reads like fan fiction that found its way to the printing press. At the end of the day, I gave this 1 star. I really went into this with high hopes, as again, this was a recommendation by someone that I trust, but oh boy, was this not the book for me. I wasn't hate reading the last half, but I was definitely hate skimming. So next up was The Vacancy by Elisabeth Carpenter, and this one's book blurb is actually pretty small, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it because it leads into all the things I hated about this book. Running from her past, Rachel answers an advert to be a live-in assistant to glamorous and eccentric author Dorothy Winters. When Dorothy's manuscript throws up striking similarities to events in Rachel's own life, she becomes convinced that the past she's tried to hide is catching up with her. Then the phone calls start, the parcel arrives, and Dorothy's friend disappears. Terrified of being blamed for murder, Rachel has nobody left to turn to. Because who can she believe when she doesn't even trust herself? The book blurb is a lie, and this book is extremely contrived and requires an idiot plot. Every single character in this book has to be an idiot for this thing to even work. The synopsis sounds great, but that is so not what we get. This is so ridiculous and requires too much suspension of disbelief for the plot to even really work. So our main girl, Rachel, is somewhat on the run after taking the life of her controlling douchebag of a husband in self-defense. So she's legally free to go. And the author, Dorothy, spoiler, is his bio mom. So Rachel took the life of her husband. Dorothy is pretending, so Dorothy's not even Dorothy. And he didn't even know his bio mom. He was raised by his aunt. So Dorothy's real name is Catherine, and she stole Dorothy's identity to trap Rachel in this little nightmare thing. But I gotta ask, does Google not exist in this book's universe? Not one person looked up Dorothy Winters and saw that she died 10 years ago? Catherine goes to all this trouble to hunt down Rachel, which Rachel isn't even her real name either. But she was able to find her, hired her, and then is setting up all these little things to freak her out, like putting blood in the bathroom, or having Matthew's name scratched into a cabinet, which is the controlling ex-husband. Which, on the one hand, as a motivation, it could be really great, but it does not work in this story. Because Catherine is a textbook narcissist. Before Matthew was essentially taken away from her, she would leave him in his crib to go to the bar. Sounds like she was barely feeding him. She had no attachment to her child. I think she even tried after his birth to just walk out of the hospital without him, to abandon him. She truly only cares about herself and will use other characters for her own gain. She is so much better than everyone and knows it and is constantly telling us this. So where the hell does this sudden maternal instinct come from? I can't buy this motivation one bit. It just makes no sense. I could understand if she had just made some mistakes after he was born, and she's trying to make up for lost time or something, but she doesn't care about him. She does not care about anyone. The entire plot falls apart because of her characterization. You cannot have her be this ruthless manipulator who suddenly wants to play mommy dearest. And especially, she's going to all this trouble to find Rachel just to torture her. And for what? It's hard to cut Rachel some slack, though, as the stakes aren't super dire to force her to stay. Dorothy and everyone around her just act super odd and like aliens pretending to be human. And Rachel seems to despise working for Dorothy. Anytime Dorothy's like, "Can I get some tea?" And Rachel's just, "When will she stop asking me for things? You're the live-in assistant. You took this job. Why are you here?" And she makes this whole point of she can't go home. But it's also not like she escaped from jail. She was legally cleared. She truly could find another job. There's zero reason that she has to stay as the story progresses and things just get weirder. She's not trapped, but chooses to stay and then chooses to freak out about the things that are happening. Girl, just leave. The book is also very slow and focuses a lot on the day-to-day activities of Rachel waking up, working, snooping, wondering why Dorothy is such a kook, drinking, being hungry, and then going to bed. It's kind of boring. Occasionally, a neighbor will stick their nose in it, or Dorothy's going to be hosting some crazy party. But it was just so slow and so outlandish. I ended up giving this 2.5 stars because I do think Carpenter is a very good writer. And I was able to finish this. I just didn't love this. I didn't feel any suspense. I didn't care about the mystery, as I kind of had already figured out what was going on, even as crazy as it sounds. And everyone in this just kind of sucks. I get what Carpenter was going for with this, but it just didn't get there. And again, the plot requires way too much suspension of disbelief, and the characterization does not work with the plot. Like, again, I understand what the idea was, and that back cover copy sounds great, but that is totally not what this book is. It's a giant misdirect. Next up was The Wedding Night by Harriet Walker, and I expected so much from this. The premise and the setup is sound. But my God, I really struggled with this. And it's not even that big. I wanted to DNF so bad, but apparently I really hate myself, so I kept reading. And I will say one good thing about this book. I took it with me on my trip to Japan, and so when I was struggling with the time change and needed to go to bed but wasn't really tired, I'd read a page of this and fall right asleep. So thanks for that, book. The reason it was putting me to sleep is because nothing happens. This book is not suspenseful. This book is nowhere near a thriller. It is boring as hell. An episode of Scooby-Doo has more suspense than this. I also think the writing style here is a major detractor and a major reason that it gave me the sleepies, because it is so wordy, long-winded, and just purple to the extreme. Even just to describe a fucking curtain, we had to have 95 adjectives and words to describe a curtain or a fence post. And if I saw one more M dash or one more sentence that had more adjectives than nouns, I was going to rip my eyes out. I really wonder if Walker was paid by the word for this one, because my God, this is wordy. I also didn't like our cast of characters. Again, nothing is really happening, and there's a pretty big group of people that we're following, but we spend so much time on the same petty issues that the women have. I know Anna feels guilt over working and taking her stress out on her husband. I know Effie feels like a sad schlub. And Lizzie is barely in the story until she takes center stage. She's the bride that this wedding night is supposed to be about. This book spends so much time on their inner issues rather than creating a thrilling plot that the back cover copy promises. There are other characters that are kind of just there, but I don't really care about them. I don't know what this book wanted to be. It wanted to be a book about women's lives and self-confidence. It wanted to be a book about friendships. It wanted to be about love and relationships. It wanted to be a suspenseful mystery, but it had no idea how to bring all of those things together. This book should be about someone terrorizing the bride-to-be, Lizzie, but she locks herself in her room and then her friends get drunk. Great friends you got there, Liz. And so then the book kicks off with a hangover-esque situation where everyone wakes up not really remembering what happened the night before. One character saw something kind of shady during the night, but she's not going to share any details until it's convenient for the plot, because why would we want anything exciting to happen in this? Seriously, it's so boring. Some vaguely threatening notes start showing up, you deserve each other. The wedding rings go missing, and Lizzie is just starting to act really weird. But instead of addressing any of those thrilling elements, we make sure that they have time to go to French bakeries and buy some bread and make lots and lots of dinners and drink lots and lots of wine. Cool. Then comes the reveal, and a character turns into some sort of incel. It's just so over the top and ridiculous. But then it turns into a Disney Channel show where a character remembers that they have lines and shames the villain, and the other women come together to wag their fingers at him. So he monologues about his evil plan, but then hangs his head really sadly and admits that he's a bad boy. What is this? This is not suspenseful. This is not thrilling. This is ridiculous. And then it ends with a super hallmarky ending with everyone popping champagne and dancing and laughing and just having a grand old time. I cannot recommend this, as I flat out think this was not good. But I would especially not recommend this if anything related to an ED is a trigger for you. There is also a mention of a miscarriage, I think. I don't know, it was very vague, and I really wasn't quite sure what was going on with some of these mentions, but I think that's what it was. So if that's also a trigger for you, please stay away from this for that reason. I mean, just stay away from this in general, unless you're having trouble sleeping, and this will do wonders for you. I gave this 1 star. This was just not the book for me and ended up wasting my time. I should have left this behind in Japan and brought home another souvenir in its place. That would have brought me a lot more happiness than keeping this on my shelves. We're halfway through. Time for more wine. Also, look at these little gnome wine covers. Is that not the cutest thing you've ever seen? I think it's the cutest thing I've ever seen. I think I got this from the Bookish box. Like, you can just buy stuff on their store. I also have one in gray. But isn't he so cute? So cute. So next up was The Haunting of Blackwood House by Darcy Coates. So I've read Coates before, and I did not love my first read by her. I think it was like The Dead of Winter, and I did not. I was very mad when I finished that. But I had heard amazing, amazing things about her haunted house or ghost stories, and I like giving authors another try. Like Rachel Harrison is a great example of I did not love her first read, but my second read by her, oh my god, I was blown away. Freaking loved it. Cannot say the same for this. Because with this, I wanted scary ghosts. I don't want to be scared because our main character is such a terrible fucking person. So we follow Mara, who is an unemployed 21 or 20, maybe she's 22, I don't know. But apparently she is quite the penny pincher, as she is able to buy a house, and the house that she wants is haunted. It's the home of an ex-serial killer, and it has no electricity. Tell me, what 20-something is moving into a house to live there full-time that doesn't have electricity? You want a cabin that's off the grid? Cool, unplug for the weekend. But a house? Anywho, Mara wants this house. Even though when they first enter it, they find it exactly as like the last family left it. Like they left in the middle of dinner. There is rotten food on the table, moldy laundry in the washer, and clothing and furniture is still in the house. These people beat it out of there. But it's affordable, so she buys the haunted house because Mara does not, I repeat, does not believe in ghosts. There is a rational explanation for everything. Except that there isn't, because a lot of the stuff that happens in this house is unexplainable. I think I really just want an explanation from Coates on why I was supposed to care if Mara survives in this haunted home. Because Mara is the worst. She sucks. I wanted to reach into the book and just like punch her in the throat if the ghosts weren't going to do it for me. She just was not likable, relatable, or even interesting. I don't have to like a main character, but at least make them interesting. Like, she has a lot of pride, which, trust me, I get. But she is stubborn to the point of stupidity. She also has to act tough, but of course she isn't so tough as soon as her boyfriend Neil is not by her side, and she can't make fun of him for being scared. There's a point where she and her boyfriend find what could be labeled as a snuff film, where one of the previous inhabitants was filming the supernatural activity and filmed their deaths on accident. What's Mara's response? Sucks to be them, but they're already dead, so me leaving this house won't change anything. Mara is just such a drama llama, and she exaggerates the things that aren't a big deal and is oblivious to the real problems and hauntings going on around her. Maybe it's not even that she's oblivious, but that she is willfully ignorant. She basically sees ghosts and is all, well, if I close my eyes, problem solved. What? Like, where's your rational explanation for that? Or she's all like, why are people saying my house is haunted? It's not haunted, even though I can't explain what happens at night, and it terrifies me. But I absolutely love this house. No, you don't. No, you don't. You are scared. It's okay to admit you're scared. There's a point in this book where we find out that the house was actually built by like her great-great-grandfather, and he was trying to do like the whole like 13 ghosts thing and trap a bunch of spirits in a hotspot of supernatural activity. And so she was supernaturally drawn to the house. That's fine. I'll give you that. That's cool. But then she finds out that this great-great-grandpa was killed in this house, and she is downright giddy about hearing about this, wondering if she can go down into the basement to find his bloodstains and laugh at his demise. What is wrong with this girl? Now, again, I do want to give the book credit in the reveal of how the hauntings started, as that was really interesting. I liked that. It was not interesting enough to outweigh all the other crap, particularly Mara. I also have to say this read really YA and felt very basic. Now, there's nothing wrong with YA, but I felt I didn't have the right expectations going into this, as it wasn't tagged as YA, but Mara just reads so young. There are just so many instances of craps and geez Louise. And given how like rough and tumble Mara comes across, there's just a tonal mismatch there. And again, the writing is just very plain. It's very tell instead of show. And I was bored. There's no personality in the writing. And some of the formatting is off. Like, there's an entire paragraph that's suddenly in first person point of view, and we get no explanation. Like, it's there and then it's gone. What was that about? Now, I did see a funny review on Goodreads from a reviewer named Salma Rambles, where it says, I was looking for something quick, easy, and immersive to read on a low-cost flight that would distract me from the screaming children and cramped seats. This book made the prospect of screaming children more appealing. And I gotta agree, Miss Rambles. I do. I agree with that. I hate to say it, but I gave this 1 star, and it deserved that star because the haunting aspect was decent. I actually enjoyed the scenes where the haunting stuff was happening in the house. I was here for it. Everything else was pretty horrendous. I really do think had we had a different main character, or someone who was somewhat of a tolerable human being, it probably would have improved my rating. I really have no idea what Coates was going for with Mara as a main character, but I do know that I hate her. Oh, I hate her so much. So next up was One Italian Summer by Rebecca Serle, and Serle. I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. This cover, adorable. The premise, super charming. I was ready for a little palate cleanser and a very moving read about a woman coming to terms with the loss of her mother by visiting Italy and a specific place that her mother really loved. I sort of got that, but I also got a lot of feelings of wanting to smack Katie, our main character, right in the face. She gets this magical, or at least I think, because it's honestly never explained like what is actually happening in this book, but she gets this chance to know her mom on this trip back when her mom was younger. And what does she do? Starts up a romance with a piece of white bread on legs. I should also mention, Katie is married. Katie was supposed to go to Positano with her mom, but then mom, also named Carol, ends up passing away. So Katie's husband, Eric, offers to come with her on this trip, but she tells him that, she's not sure she loves him anymore and that their relationship has been too easy. So that must mean that they're not meant to be, and maybe they should take a Ross and Rachel style break, but leaning more on Ross's interpretation so Katie can sleep with other people and, not really feel bad about it. Geez, Eric, it's not like she's asking for much. So Katie breaks his heart and runs away to Italy while bitching about Eric and what a loser he is for being polite and friendly and being able to make conversation with strangers. She also bitches about her mom because her mom didn't prepare her for being able to travel on her own or do anything on her own. Katie, grow up. You're an adult. Figure it out. So Katie arrives in Italy and spouts the 2 words of Italian that she knows and points out all the stereotypical Italian things and then checks into her hotel and apparently falls through a wormhole or into some sort of time loop. Because there's time travel in this. But it's not done very well. And it's kind of revealed as a twist at the end, but then we don't get an explanation for how it happened, why it happened. I don't even know what the hell happened. It felt so weird to have this thrown in there and not have it be a bigger revelation or a bigger mystery for Katie to figure out. She's trying to figure out how she's seeing her mom, but also doesn't dig very deep or even really try very hard. Again, apparently that's another fault of Carol's, because Carol always had the answer to Katie's questions, so Katie never had to bother to figure out anything on her own. Accountability. Have you heard of it, Katie? So apparently Katie has been experiencing the 1992 version of Positano so she can be with her mother. Fine, let's go with it. But then Katie spends so much time with another character named Adam. A love interest. I don't care about Adam. I don't care about a romance subplot in a book that should be about Katie and her, honestly, as stupid as it is, her soulmate of a mother. Because that's what Katie says. She and her mom are soulmates. Not Carol and her husband or Katie's father, but Katie and Carol are soulmates. She gets this, again, time loopy, magical opportunity to spend time with Carol and does fuck all with it. Everything just gets so repetitious as Katie wakes up and enjoys the view, has breakfast with Adam, has lunch with Carol, but then has dinner with Adam, and goes to sleep. She's kind of getting to know her mom and get to reconnect with her and enjoy her, presence one last time before she has to return to reality. But she's also not really. I didn't feel anything about her spending time with Carol. Because Katie doesn't seem to feel any certain way about spending this time with her mother. What are we doing here? That's what I thought this whole point of the book was supposed to be about. And then, of course, in the end, it ends with Katie getting her happily ever after, where she realizes that, maybe I do love Eric. And so they get back together. A few pages after she sleeps with Adam. Eric is so lucky to have a girl like her. Now, I will say the good things in this book were the descriptions of Italy, as I want to go there, right now after reading this, and the descriptions of the food and the wine. Sign me up to eat and drink it all. But those elements were not enough to redeem this book, nor our protagonist. This was boring, and it wasted so much potential for an interesting story. And it wasted a beautiful setting. Questo libro è il peggiore. This book is the worst. I should learn the word for fucking in Italian so I can add that in there next time. I gave this 1.5 stars. I don't recommend it unless you simply read about the setting and just skip over everything else. It's not good. So not good. So mad when I finish this. Next up is the last one by Will Dean. And this one we're going to read the book blurb because, like the Vacancy, it's a lie. When Kaz steps on board the exclusive cruise liner RMS Atlantica, it's the start of a vacation of a lifetime with her new love, Pete. On their first night, they explore the ship, eat, dance, make friends. But when Kaz wakes up the next morning, Pete is missing. And when she walks out into the corridor, all the cabin doors are open. To her horror, she soon realizes that the ship is completely empty. No passengers, no crew, nobody but her. The Atlantica is steaming into the mid-Atlantic, and Kaz is the only person on board. But that's just the beginning of her terrifying journey in this white-knuckle mystery. This was less mystery on an empty cruise ship, and more Saw at sea, complete with its very own jigsaw. This was not what I expected after reading that back cover copy. If you can't tell, I'm pretty annoyed with it. This book is torture. And I mean that both as a reader and for the main characters. Because by like page 15 or something, Kaz isn't alone. She's not the only one on this ship. There are 3 other people that are on board with her. And so the book turns into torturing these 4 people on a cruise ship as it's part of a new reality show. It's on the dark web. People want to watch the contestants die. Except not really, because it turns out that out of the 4 contestants, 2 are actors. Just go to hell, book. I hate it. Oh my god, I was so mad about this read. This book is ridiculous. Everything in it was just for the shock value, and it felt like it was written just to be gruesome and cruel. I'm also not really sure what point the book was trying to make. I mean, I get the whole reality TV can be gross and the lasting effects on the contestants, but at least those people knew what they were signing up for. It's very hard to make that theme stick when none of the people agreed to do this. I mean, I guess the 2 actors did, but the other 2 real contestants, they didn't agree to this. They didn't consent to this. I also think the dialogue in this is beyond terrible. Like, characters would just suddenly talk about their backstory and say exactly who they are as a person. This is not how you do characterization. It was just clunky and poorly executed. The final twist in this book made me see red. So our main character, Kaz, wins and just wants to go home after surviving this hellish experience. She's flying home with Pete. And she goes to the bathroom. And when she comes out, the plane is empty. Oh, fuck off, book. Now, I've seen some people who have loved this ending, but I think it's hot garbage. Unless that plane is speeding across a never-ending runway at 500 miles an hour, there is no way the production studio could evacuate an entire commercial jet in, the 5 minutes that assuming Kaz is really slow in the bathroom? No. The only things I did like was that, Dean does create some really great tension, and, I could feel their hunger and the cold and just the sheer desperation of these characters. I also appreciated that the chapters are short and easy to read, but on the other hand, they all end in cliffhangers, and there are over 130 chapters. I ended up giving this 2 stars, and I feel I'm being very, very generous. I think if my expectations had been better set, I would have felt differently about this. Had I known more of the real genre that this book was in, I could have accepted a lot of the plot better, or at least been willing to hoist anchor and set sail on this crazy adventure. The premise is fine, but it's not what I was sold by reading this back cover copy. As it was, I couldn't suspend enough disbelief, and the story became way too convoluted and way more ridiculous than I expected. I honestly was expecting almost maybe a supernatural horror story with this woman alone on a ship. And again, that's definitely not what we got. That is so not what we got. And I'm mad about it. Okay, switching gears, but also kind of not, because I guess this book also deals with ships, is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, and I know a lot of people like this, and I'm so sorry if you love this. I love that for you, but I do not like this. I will preface this by saying, if it's not obvious by my review of spoiler alert, me and romances, we don't really get along. I keep trying. I want to find a good one. This was not it. So apparently our heroine in this, named Piper, is based on Alexis from Schitt's Creek, and is kind of vapid and a spoiled woman child, but at times she went against her characterization for the sake of banter. Now, I will say I really did like Piper and her relationship with her sister. I felt those are really well-written aspects of the book. Our hero? Not a fan. Brendan was fine at first, but his whole possession of Piper it really bugged me. He has this whole like alpha male thing going on, and that's just not my cup of tea. Again, like a spoiler alert, your mileage may vary. You might really like this. I also really did not like how he constantly would put Desiree, who is his deceased wife, and their relationship down in order to prove what a goddess Piper is. Sir, your wife is 6 feet under. Do you really need to kick her while she's down? He could have very well loved Desiree and mourns her loss, but also realizes that he is still alive and it's okay to be a part of the land of the living and move on and find another love. Like, if I were to pass away, I would not want my husband just mourning me for the rest of his life and being alone. That wouldn't make me happy. Like, I don't want him finding someone the very next day, but I would still want him to find someone to spend his life with. He should not have to spend it alone. But for Brendan to sit there and basically be like, man, I'm glad Desiree is dead because our marriage was so boring. And I don't even really know if I liked her or was even attracted to her. And now I get to mess around with the most amazing woman I've ever laid eyes on. It was kind of gross. It did not sit well with me. And actually, I feel like Brendan is kind of gross and misogynistic in general. Like, there are a lot of scenes where Brendan infantilizes Piper, and honestly, there were some weird, like, daddy-daughter vibes in this. And what really pushed me over the edge was his treatment of Piper's sister, Hannah. Hannah is protective of Piper too, and he just kind of ignores her or is downright rude to her face. Now, I do have to fault Piper for this one too, as she allows this treatment of her sister. If any boyfriend of mine ever treated my sister this way, bye boy. Like, no, you do not get to talk to my sister that way. So again, I kind of have to fault both the hero and heroine in that aspect. I also have a nit with the fact that everything is very gendered, and it really started to grate on my nerves. We've got male exertion and male vulnerability. At one point, I think it's even said that he smells like unapologetic maleness. What does that smell like? Like BO? The woods? Beer? Please tell me that it's just not copious amounts of Axe body spray. As a straight woman myself, this read way too straight, even for me. Like, we get it. Brendan is a big burly man, and Piper is a female toothpick who will snap in half if a man even dares breathe on her too hard. It got really boring and repetitious of how tiny Piper is and how big Brendan is, and he's a man. You know, a man. A real man. With hair everywhere. He isn't like those other men who groom themselves and dress well. He drinks beer and grunts and growls and revs his power tools. He will destroy anything and anyone in his path if they so much as look at Piper without his consent. No thanks. I don't want that. I don't want a man who grunts at his friends, who tells me my body is his. And again, if this works for you, I love that for you. You might like this. But the sheer volume of repetitive statements about how male and masculine Brendan is, and how tiny and feminine Piper is, was really annoying. He's getting excited, and it's so male and masculine that he has to release the tension of his male sexual frustration. I get it. He's a man. I understand. Can we move on and talk about something else? Again, comparing this to spoiler alert, no surprise. Some of the spicy scenes in this were funny when they're not written to be funny. I couldn't take some of the wording seriously. And actually, I think that's an issue that I have with the book overall. Some of the language in this is it's odd. And a bit too twee for a book filled with like on-page like romance scenes instead of fade to blacks. Like, there's a point where Piper is having her moment, mid-coitus, and talks about fairies and gumdrops. I can't. I ended up giving this 1.5 stars, and I think that's pretty generous. I wasn't exactly hate reading this at the end, but I was for sure skimming. I really liked Piper in the beginning, and I am really happy that she got her happily ever after. She did evolve and mature, but without losing what makes her her, and I really appreciated that in this. It felt very Legally Blonde, and I can definitely give the book credit for that. And I can understand why people like Tessa Bailey. I don't think she's for me. And again, that's probably just because me and romances, we haven't clicked yet. Next up was Margo's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. So my biggest beef with this is I don't know what the point was. I know all stories are a snapshot of a character's life, but it's typically one where they grow and change and learn and share a lesson on why we should be good people. All I learned from this is that Margo had a baby, she struggles, but she's also amazingly good at OnlyFans and TikTok without really knowing what she's doing. I really felt disconnected from this, and not just because there's some point of view switches. The first 30 pages of the book goes back and forth between first and fourth person, and it's addressed. It felt very Fleabag, but not nearly as funny. But really, it comes down to I don't know or understand Margo as a character. She's so naive, but she also grew up with a single mom and knew about her dad, but couldn't be with him as he had a whole ass other family. But she doesn't realize that having a baby at 19 is going to be tough and that she has to actually think about things and figure things out. I feel like I don't know her or why she does what she does. She ends up having her son because she's never wanted anything so much. She starts an OnlyFans because she's never wanted anything so much. She wants to be famous. She's never wanted anything so much. Seriously, I started tabbing the many times that she throws around this phrase of how she has never wanted anything so much. But why? Where was this motivate? There aren't that many emotions from Margo. I kind of started to imagine her like a Westworld robot imitating a human. Her dad had more emotions and made me feel more things than Margo ever does. I actually don't think I could accurately describe her because she almost seems to be a new character in every scene. We have 2 points of view telling us her story, but I still have no idea who she is or what she wants. To add to the robot feeling, her instant rise to fame was kind of laughable. And in a way, I think it makes people think that it's super easy to become famous. Her little TikTok venture is really strange. I don't get it, but I'm also not 20. It could just not be my generation's humor. But this is not how this works. This isn't how any of this works. She literally just decides to start an OnlyFans one night and starts posting pics of her boobs and immediately makes $4,000. Then she comes up with a persona and then changes it and changes it again and makes $12,000 in an hour. Are you kidding me? Margo has no clue what she's doing, but just bumbles her way into success, and it really bugged me. Honestly, Margo's dad, Jinx, that's his stage name, his real name is James, was probably my favorite character, even though he's kind of depressed and is dealing with some pretty serious shit. I also liked Margo's roommate Susie, as she's extremely comfortable with who she is and is proud of her cosplaying and just being a full-out nerd. If you're gonna be like anyone in this book, be like Susie. I also have to say, I think I was expecting this to be funnier, given that the cover calls it laugh out loud funny. I chuckled at times and I was amused, but I wasn't rolling on the floor laughing or having to reread scenes because they were so funny. Honestly, I'm truly baffled by this reading experience. It's one of those books that makes me go, is it me? Am I in that Taylor Swift song? I'm the problem, it's me. This was rated, at least at the time when I read it, pretty highly on Goodreads, and I feel like I'm missing something. I have no problem with the book's content and reading a story about a woman running an OnlyFans account. It's just the story itself is so blah and disjointed and just boring. It's just a series of events in Margo's life, and it felt like a diary and not a story. I'm going to cite another Goodreads review. This was by Anna, who summarized this book really well. While there are aspects to appreciate, the experience as a whole feels more like a series of highs and lows rather than a cohesive journey. And that's exactly how I feel. And honestly, this should have been a relatively fast read. It's not that big of a book. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I think the idea is there, and I did see that this has also been optioned for like a TV show, and I do think this will play out much better on the screen. But if you're going to publish this as a book and charge people money for it, then actually do the work to make it work as a book as well. When I finished this, all I could ask was, what was the point? I mean, I guess to make Rufi Thorpe money, because she's now sold it as a book that Book of the Month picked up, and a TV show. I mean, good for her, get that bag, but I'm not reading another book like this. All right, last worst read of 2024 is, and this one pains me. It's very unfortunate, but it is Emma in the Night by Wendy Walker. I've really enjoyed Wendy Walker in the past, but my God, my eyes were glazing over with this one. I really, really had to pay attention, but I also found that this just was not holding my interest, and it moves so slowly. Mostly because this book is all tell and no show. This book is basically our main character Cass monologuing and telling stories, but in the slowest way possible. I wanted a thriller. There are very few thrills to be had in this. I mean, you could make it thrilling by taking a drink every time you read the word narcissist. That is, if you want to depart this world severely wasted. So like I said, this book is Storytime by Cass, and it's also a clinical look at narcissism. The family in this puts the FU in dysfunctional. And I mean that literally. There's some random instances of incest in this that honestly, when they were revealed, it wasn't even that shocking because everything that's happening in this book is so fucking boring. There's even the twist reveal at the end that Emma has been dead the entire time. But it didn't blow my mind because it didn't really work logically with the story that we're told. Frankly, it's all just so unbelievable. This book just felt really off and was leaning way too hard into telling instead of showing. Especially since we're in Cass's head, and there is nothing that I hate more than a first-person point of view where the character is hiding something from us. That's not how we think. I also say the writing of this was very choppy and stilted. I read until I was like 150 pages in, and then I started skimming. And I mean, I was skimming pretty much the rest of the book, and I really didn't care what I had missed. This was very, very close to being a DNF, and I honestly should have DNF'd this. I was trying to fit it in right before our trip to Spain, and I think that also contributed to me skimming it because it didn't hold my interest. I was so bored every time I picked this up. This really reads like kind of a waste. And I ended up giving this 2 stars. And I think Walker's reputation really helped her here, or I probably would have given this 1 star. I really don't know what happened, as normally I love the way Walker blends suspense and psychology. I was bored to tears while reading this, and it felt really forced. It kind of felt like, in a way, it was half an idea, but it wasn't really fleshed out. And this gets really complex, but not in a good way. The best word I can come up with is this was tedious. Again, it's just Cass telling a story and hoping that this like forensic psychiatrist picks up on Cass's little clues that she's dropping into it and can like puzzle the pieces together. And miraculously, the psychologist is able to do it. Like, good for her. But it doesn't work. Do not start with this if you haven't read anything by Wendy Walker. And again, I was skimming, but I think in a few months, I'm gonna have trouble remembering what the hell this book was about, or forgetting entirely that I have already read this. This was that bad. I cannot recommend this. Now, I do have to give a special shout out to the one book that I did DNF this year, and that is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. It was my only DNF of the year, and on the one hand, I hate giving up on a book. The author put a lot of work into it. On the other hand, I'm very proud of myself for not continuing to suffer through it when I was not having a good time. With that book, I couldn't even get myself to hate read or skim it. I was not connected with that book. I could not get into it, and I decided to DNF. And that's a pretty big deal for me because I really try not to DNF books because at least then that way I can say like I read the entire thing. I can give a good opinion of it. That one I couldn't. And at least to be honest, like I read that one for book club, and it sounds like everyone in the book club had a lot of problems getting through that one, so it's not just me. But ooh, buddy, that was not a good book. Okay. So those are my top 10 worst reads of 2024. So cheers to that. We're done with the year. But I would love to hear, what was your worst read of 2024? Or I guess if we want to end things maybe on a positive note, tell me about your best read this year. Tell me about either or both in the comments below, as I would love to hear about it, especially, I guess, a good book so I can put it on my to-be-read shelf for 2025. Or tell me about the worst book you read, and maybe I can commiserate right alongside you. Otherwise, thank you for joining me in the reading room and / Whine Club. I'm not really sure how I want to categorize this video yet, but either way, thanks for joining me, and I am wishing you and yours a very happy new year and a healthy start to 2025.